Welcome to the Beginner Photography Podcast. Today we're talking about shooting film and whether it's a waste of money or the key to greatness. Let's get into it.
Welcome to the Beginner Photography Podcast with Raymond Hatfield, the podcast dedicated to helping you grow your photography skills. Raymond interviews the world's top photographers in their field to ask questions that will get you taking better photos today. Now, with you as always, husband, father, home brewer, LA Dodger fan, and Indianapolis wedding photographer, Raymond Hatfield.
Welcome back to this episode of the Beginner Photography Podcast. As always, I am your host, Raymond Hatfield, and today it's a little, it's been a tough week for me. And if you follow baseball, you will know why. Because the Dodgers, who were they were the most winningest team in all of baseball this year, and they lost in Game 5 of the divisional series to the Washington Nationals. So the game actually started off, pretty strong. Very quickly, we got a 3-0 lead. But then back-to-back home runs were thrown by Kershaw, of all pitchers, who is arguably the best pitcher of our generation, who in his 11 years of pitching has never allowed back-to-back home runs during a regular season game. So obviously this caused the Dodgers to tie the game, and then there was a grand slam in the top of the 10th that really just sealed it for the Dodgers for a no chance of a third attempt at a World Series win. It was winner take all, and the Dodgers did not win that game. I'm heartbroken. We were so close. We were so close. I mean, we had it. The Nationals. Come on. We were a shoo-in. It was a done deal. But, after that game, I couldn't believe it. Oh, I was so upset. I could not believe it. But you go to bed, you wake up the next day, and I don't know. The world just isn't as rich as it was the day before, I guess you'd say. But you have your cup of coffee, and you just keep moving forward. Because, what else are you going to do? Sure, you still think about it. How could you not? I mean, there's memories all around you with hats, shirts, stickers, on my car. The coffee mug that I'm currently drinking out of. The photo of, Dodger Stadium that hangs above my computer to look at every single day. And it's painful, but you can't change the past, so reluctantly you just force yourself to move on, and there you go. So, gotta catch my breath there for a minute. That was a tough one to relive. Well, let's talk about some photography. What do you say, huh? That's probably why you guys are here. This isn't the beginner Dodger. That doesn't make any sense. So let's talk about photography. If you have been in the Beginner Photography Podcast Facebook group, then you will know that as of recently, I've been shooting quite a bit of film. And I'm working on a project this upcoming December. I just went down to Texas. So this project that I'm working on, I for those of you who don't know, I went to film school because originally, right after high school, I wanted to go to school and become a cinematographer. Cinematographer is the person who works on movie sets, TV, film, video, and is in control of the lighting and the camera movement. And I thought that I would love it. I didn't love it as much as I thought that I would. Turned to photography, love it. But I still have some ties into the film industry, and this coming December, I will actually be shooting a feature film, part of a feature film, and we're shooting on film. So I thought, I really need to familiarize myself with shooting on film more than, because it's been a few years. So that's kind of what I've been up to. So I've been shooting a lot more film. I've even taken my film camera out at weddings and a few other, family events. And it's funny because people, the number one question that I get is why? Why are you shooting film? And with digital workflows just being so seamlessly integrated into our lives, you take a photo on your phone, it's on, your tablet, your computer, it's already on the cloud. Google's already edited it and made it, stylized without any sort of work. These digital integrations are just, in our lives. And some of the people who are asking why I shoot film have a genuine curiosity. And some people ask, like, with this sense of superiority, with digital, like, oh, I got the newest camera. Why would you even want to shoot with a 35-year-old camera? But regardless, either way, it's a solid question to ask. So let me preface by saying that there are a lot of different paths that you can take in photography. There is no one answer. So because today I'm talking about film, I'm going to share who shooting film is for and also who shooting film is not for. And that may be you, and that's totally okay. What works for some won't work for others, especially if you have a clearly defined goal attached to it. And in my case, it is getting more familiar with film. There are certain aspects of this motion picture that I'll be working on, and knowing how film reacts in certain lighting situations is very important to me. So those are my clearly defined goals. Also, just how it renders certain colors. So those were my goals, but you don't have to have the same goals to take advantage of film. And I'm going to talk about that here in later in this episode. So when I graduated film school, I didn't know this at all, but when I graduated film school, my mom actually gave me my dad's Pentax K1000 with the 50mm f2 lens that they bought in 1987 at Sears. My mom still had the receipt and everything. And I thought this was very cool. I didn't even know that my dad had this camera, and now it was being given to me. And I was super excited because that's when I really started to, dip my toes into photography. And I had just learned all about, shooting on film and film photography, or just film at film school. So I was really excited. And for that first year, I probably put like 10 or 12 rolls through the camera, and it was fantastic. I'd go out, I'd shoot, I'd take it to go get developed, I'd get the photos, and then, that was it. And that's how it worked. But 2 or 3 years later, I started shooting a little bit less film. For me, I got my first digital SLR, which was the Canon XT. And then, so since I was shooting more of that, I started shooting less film. And then at some point, I don't remember if it was in between a move or if I was taking my camera somewhere. Regardless, one day I went to go pick up the camera and the light meter inside was broken. So the light meter inside of the camera tells you either how bright or how dark your photo is going to be depending on your settings. So because it was broke, and frankly I was broke, I couldn't afford to fix it, and therefore I just did not do much shooting. Now I had a light meter, an external light meter that I used for motion pictures, but I really didn't want to have all this extra gear. I didn't want to have extra things with me, like the camera and the meter. I didn't want to have to go out with the meter the photo, and then shoot. I just wanted to go out and shoot. And that's why having a light meter inside of your camera was really important for me. So, like I said, I really didn't do much shooting. I'd go out, maybe I'd take a few photos here or there, but I never really finished one roll at a time. Well, earlier this year, I think it was about February, maybe it was April or so, I found a roll of exposed film. So it was just canister of film, and it had already been shot. And I had no idea what was on it, obviously. You just don't know. You have to go get it developed. I don't remember when it was shot. I don't remember anything about this roll. But had to go get it developed. So I went to go get it developed, and when I got the photos back, I got to tell you, I fell in love. I fell in love with the feel of the photos in my hand. I fell in love with the light, the way that the film was able to render the lights and the shadows. I fell in love with the colors. They were so rich and yet muted at the same time. And I fell in love with the texture. I mean, I truly loved these photos that I got. And it also helped, that these photos were from when Charlie, probably 3 years ago. I mean, like when he was much younger. And I remember taking those photos. So it was fantastic to be kind of transported back, in that way that sometimes photography can do. When you look at this photo, you feel a little bit nostalgic. And then to see like a great photo along with it just really sealed my love of photography, specifically film, right then and there. And I will post those photos in the show notes of this episode. You can check them out by swiping up if you're using the Apple Podcast app, or by going to beginnerphotographypodcast.com. And this is episode 169. So just check out the show notes for episode 169. So, few months went by, I suppose, maybe 2 months. So I went back to my local camera store, which is Robert's Camera in Indianapolis, and met with my buddy Adam there, who was helping me out. And there was some expired film, and it wasn't very expired. I think that it was just freshly expired. And talking about expired film is a whole nother podcast, but I wasn't worried about it. I went ahead and bought 3 rolls, and while I was there, I saw that they had like a used camera bin, and inside was a Mamiya 135 AF. And this camera I had never seen before, but it just looked cool. And it wasn't a zoom lens. It was, it had the wind advance, where you take your thumb on the lever, and then every time you take a photo, you have to wind the reel. It's just a really, really cool camera. I knew nothing about this camera. Had a fixed, I believe it's a 38 mil, 35 mil. Hold on one second. Yeah, 38 millimeter f2.8 lens. And that was super exciting. I thought, this is a great camera. And the kicker, the camera was only $8. I thought, oh man, there has to be something wrong with this camera. Super excited. But for $8, I'm going to find out. So I bought the camera anyway, threw that roll of film in there, and I just started shooting. And what was great was that there was no light meter inside. There was no anything really. It was a point and shoot camera. Point and shoot. You load the film, you tell the camera what the speed of the film is, and then you just start shooting, and that is it. That is it. It takes care of everything else. And I thought, well, we'll just see what these photos look like, Anyway, so I shot those 3 rolls of film, and then I went to go get those developed. And when I went to go get those 3 rolls of film development and the prints were like $65 for those 3 rolls. And right then, I almost like, whoa, $65? And that's just, and I get it, it's kind of a dying industry. To be able to do something like that is more of a specialty, so therefore it's a little bit more expensive. I totally get that. And as each day goes on, it's, if you go somewhere to get it done, it's going to become more expensive. That's how it works, right? And right then I thought, there's no way that's just too much money for this to be sustainable. I can't be shooting 3 rolls of film every single month and getting those developed for $65. Now, while I love the photos, they're not $65 a month better than digital. So I got them developed anyway, like I said. But I thought, when I got those photos back again, it was the same feeling. I loved them. I loved the photos almost even more, because this time now I wasn't so focused behind the camera. I was still able to get that feel, that texture, that color, while doing less work and more consistently than with my Pentax K1000, because the light meter was broken in that camera. But I thought, if I want to shoot film, that this is just the price that I'm gonna have to pay, because I don't have a spare room in my house to convert into a dark room to be able to develop my own film. So a few more months went by, shot a few more rolls, still loving just that rawness and the feel of the photos. And then one day, I was on YouTube and the internet gods delivered exactly what I needed to see. It was a video by Willem Verbeek, who I've been watching his videos almost nonstop. He is a film shooter, like exclusively film. And this video that he posted was called Develop Color Film at Home. And I thought I'm interested in this, obviously. I watched the video, and that video is in the show notes as well. I watched it, and I was amazed by how easy it was. And I was amazed at how you don't need a darkroom. Now, you don't need a darkroom in the traditional sense where it's like, a whole room that's blacked out and there's like the red light in there. You don't need any of that. You do need a dark room to load the film into the development tank, but I actually just used my bathroom. I turned off the lights, closed the door, locked it so that the kids don't accidentally walk in, put a blanket over the door to prevent any light leaks, and then that works just fine. And that is easy and it is quick. So I thought, okay, well, I'm gonna go ahead and give this a shot because I love this. I feel like there's something here, but I'm missing that element, right? And I wanted to know more about it. So I bought everything that I needed to start developing my film at home, and I was all set. So before we go any further, let's talk about the pros and the cons of film, because this episode is called, shooting film. Is it a waste of time, or is it a waste of money, or is it the key to greatness? So we're going to talk about the pros and cons of shooting film. Okay, first, the pros. Because you are limited by how many photos you can actually take on your roll of film, you are forced to slow down. You are forced to be more intentional with your photos. And you're forced to be more in the moment of what's happening rather than stuck behind your camera. So that to me is a huge, huge bonus. Be more, present, still capture great photos. Pro number 2, there's no editing. If you have a lab scan the photos and send them to you, there's no editing that you need to do. They're done. You're done. Now, if you decide to develop the photos at home, you will need to scan the negatives and then convert them into positives in Lightroom. And that's if you do it yourself. And then there's where you can kind of, there's more control, right? You have that editing capability because now, if you scan it with your DSLR, you can now shoot it in RAW as well and retain a lot of additional information. But if you don't want to worry about that, then you can just develop and get the photos printed. No editing. Fantastic. And then pro number 3 is that film cameras don't go obsolete. And they can be found with, beautiful lenses for dirt cheap. And I'm going to get into exactly how cheap after this. Okay, so now let's talk about the cons. The cons of shooting film, number 1, just the cost of money. Okay, we talked about that. I'm going to dive even deeper. I'm going to break down exactly how much it costs to shoot film. But, because it costs money every time you shoot, there's always going to be something in your head that's just like, I got to shoot less to save that money. And that's a con. That's a con. Whereas you buy a digital camera, you buy an SD card, and now you're good, right? You're good to just shoot. So, cost of money. Number 2 is the cost of time. Now, if you develop film yourself, the whole development process from warming up your chemicals to development to drying, scanning, and converting your negatives takes about 3 hours from start to finish per roll. Again, maybe that's not a huge amount of time, especially for how little you're actually doing it, but it still does take time. And number 3 is consistency. It is hard to achieve a consistent look unless you develop and scan your photos yourself. Your image will change depending on how you develop your film. So if you go to one film lab and their chemicals are at, 100 degrees Fahrenheit, and then you go to another lab and you were to develop the same roll, which wouldn't be possible because you only have one roll, but those chemicals were at, say, 105 degrees Fahrenheit, if it was developed for the same amount of time, your photos are going to be completely different. The lighting is going to be different, and the colors are going to be different as well. And then we're not even talking about your scanner itself. Every film lab has a different scanner, so there you go. Consistency is hard unless you develop and scan your film yourself. So those are the pros and those are the cons. To me, the pros, I feel, outweigh the cons because I'm the one developing the film. So, and again, we're going to talk about the development process here in just a moment. But first, I want to talk about the biggest myth that I hear about when shooting film. And that is, when I hear other photographers, and I kind of made the title of this episode kind of clickbaity, right? The key to greatness, right? Because a lot of people feel that when you shoot film, shooting film in and of itself will make you a better photographer. And that is simply not true. Unless you are just hyper-focused on learning film photography, it's possible that you won't learn anything. Many times I get my photos back, I go to shoot a roll and I just don't shoot all 36 photos, and then, it goes that I use that roll next month, and then by the time that I develop those photos, I look at them and think, I really wish that I remembered the settings for this photo right here, because I remembered trying to get a certain photo in my head and this just isn't what I was looking for. But because film doesn't hold the information, which digital does, digital photos, your settings are baked into the photo so that when you go back and look at them, even years from now, you can still learn from, things that you see or potential mistakes that you made. So simply shooting on film will not inherently make you better. And I can prove that to you by telling you to go back and look at your parents' or your grandparents' old film photos, because if you do, you will find bad photos. There will be bad photos in this collection of prints. So if there are bad film photos, that means that every film photo ever taken isn't great, right? Okay, so then why do people say that it makes you a better photographer? And I really think that there's something psychological when you know that you only have 24 or 36 photos, depending on your roll of film, that you can take. You ask yourself, even if it's not conscious, whether or not what you're looking at is actually worth a photo. If it is, then you take, 1 or 2 photos, not 20. And if it's not, then you take 0 photos and not 20, as you would. Oftentimes with digital, you just go out and sometimes you think to yourself, I like what it is that I see. I don't know how I can translate it into a photo, but if I just photograph it now a few different ways, surely I'm sure to, I'm going to get one that is good. And that's not always the case. And with film, you're just hyper aware of that, right? If you don't think that you can make a good photo, you see a scene in front of you and you think, I like this, and then you try to make it a photo and you can't, you just don't take a photo. That's how it works. So that's one way, because now when you go back and you look at your photos, you have more keepers than you have photos that just aren't going to make the cut. And when you imagine somebody taking $1 out of your pocket every time you take a photo, it just forces you to slow down and be more aware of the bad photos. Everybody can think of a time where you go to take a photo and you think, this isn't really working, but you go to take the photo anyway. You don't do that with film, because you can imagine, somebody reaching into your pocket every time you take the photo and just take out like a $1 bill. Okay, so it's not exactly $1, but I'm going to get into the cost breakdown in just a second. So when you slow down, you're just more intentional with your photos. You ask yourself, is this the best photo that you can take? When you're looking through that viewfinder, you pay more attention to how you frame the photo. You question if f2.8 will be enough depth of field, or if maybe f4 is the right answer. And if so, how are you going to change your shutter speed? You look at your background. You look at colors differently. you're more aware of that bright red background or that telephone wire that just cuts right through somebody's head. And simply being aware of those things will help make you a better photographer. It will help you make more intentional decisions because you know that you're limited by the amount of frames that you have available and the cost. So every year here in Indianapolis, Indianapolis hosts an event called Motorcycles on Meridian, where an estimated 30,000 motorcycles show up. Now, growing up, I was an avid motorcycle rider. I was riding motorcycles before driving cars, and I was excited for this. So I decided to go to this all-day event and shoot some film. So I brought 2 rolls of film, 36 frames each, 72 total photos possible. I was there shooting for 4 hours, and I shot a total of 40 frames. If I was at a wedding for 4 hours, I would shoot close to 1,000 or 1,200 frames. But I had a hard time shooting those 40 frames. Why? Well, you kind of have to, you just naturally ask yourself when you're shooting film, like, how many shots do I actually need? And that's important. How many photos do you need to tell a story? You're going to need a beginning, a middle, an end. You need a wide shot, a medium shot, close-ups. You want an environmental photo, and then some details. That's 8 photos, And then some photos, you take a few shots just to make sure that you nailed exposure or the right moment, right? A reaction, perfect composition. So even if I took 3 photos, if I took 3 shots of each photo right there, that's only 24 photos. So after those 24 photos, I just started experimenting with composition and looking for moments to anticipate some action. And after 40 photos, I gotta tell you, I was toast. I really couldn't think of anything else to photograph that would, capture the feeling and the environment that was Motorcycles on Meridian. So I got home, I developed the film, and I have to say, I'm pretty proud of those photos. And you can see those photos in the show notes of this episode as well. I mean, this show notes for this episode are just packed full of stuff, so check it out. Again, beginnerphotographypodcast.com, episode 160, where is it at? 169. There you go, episode 169. Okay, so feel free to check those out. I'd love it if you did. And just, see what they are. Now, are they the best photos that I've ever taken? No, they're not. You might look at them and think, wow, Raymond, these are garbage, but I get it. Photography is subjective. That's totally fine. What I see and I like in these photos might be something that you don't like about these photos. But did it teach me anything about photography? Well, if you think about an event or a shoot, analytically beforehand, map out the who, what, when, where, and why, what shots do you need? What lens are you going to use for those shots? What will you say to your subject? Do you need any additional lighting? If so, where is it going to be placed for specific photos? Then you achieve great things with the limited resources, and you don't have to go into debt by shooting film. If you plan ahead, you'll be fine. And make no mistake, this is how you should be shooting digital as well, with intention. It's not just a film thing. It's just that because we're so limited with film, we're hyper aware of the photos that we need to get, and we just naturally start shooting with intention. Now, this is how you should be shooting with digital, but, sometimes we don't. We get, we take it easy. We just go in there, we snap off a bunch of shots, and we hope for the best. Okay, so that is covered, right? Now, let's get to the thing that I'm sure everybody is, looking forward to, which is the cost. The cost of shooting film. Now, as I said earlier, it is not quite $1 for every photo that I take, but let's break it down as if you were starting from scratch today, as I did, and if you already had all the equipment. So I shot 40 frames at Motorcycles on Meridian, but that's because I had to finish up my previous roll before I loaded in a fresh roll. So let's break down the cost of simply 36 photos. That's a standard roll. Now a standard roll, it's probably $8, okay? Now let's assume that you already have the camera, and if you don't, you can get one online for under $100. And remember, film is full frame. So you can shoot full frame for under $100 when you're shooting with film. That is exciting. Okay, so we have the camera, we have the film, $8. Now we need to develop it. What you need is a tank, a reel, chemicals, and then bottles to hold those chemicals. Now the chemicals come in a powder form, and they cost me $40 shipped, and those chemicals last for about 16 rolls. So everything else, that you have to buy is just once, and that cost me about $60. That's, again, the tank, the reel, and then the bottles to hold the chemicals, $60. So right now, $40 for the chemicals, $60 for the rest of the equipment. We're at about $100 just to get started. And with that, you will have everything that you need to develop 576 photos. And then after that, it's just an additional $40 in chemicals to develop every 576 photos after that. So now let's take into account the film. Again, $8. So that's $128 for 16 rolls of film, and then $40 in chemicals is $168. So $168 divided by 576 photos is 29 cents per photo. Is that a waste of money? I don't think so. An entry-level DSLR is about $500. You could shoot more than 1,200 photos on film for that price, and that price includes the camera, includes the $100 camera. So plus is anything really a waste of money if you're trying something new, especially if it's a hobby like this, right? I don't think that it is. Now if you don't like it, you have gained so much experience. You now know more about the process of film, the development, the how it's made, and it gives you a really good understanding and appreciation for how digital photography works. And again, if you don't like it, I will gladly buy your unused film. So if you are a hands-on person, somebody who loves to really know how something works, the ins and the outs, somebody who tries new things, to do fun experiments, somebody who is curious, then I think that shooting film is probably the most beneficial thing that you could do for your photography. And I don't mean that you have to shoot film forever. I mean getting started and continuing to shoot film alongside digital. I think that it is the most important thing that you could do to learn and grow your photography. And that is why I listed it actually in my free ebook, 46 Creative Photography Ideas, which you can actually grab by signing up with the link in the show notes, again, packed full of resources, or just the resources page, which you can get to at the top of beginnerphotographypodcast.com. But is shooting film the key to greatness? It's not. Shooting film is not the key to greatness any more than shooting digital would be. So again, this episode is a little bit clickbaity because, as you now know, shooting film, I think, is neither a waste of money, nor is it the key to greatness. It all comes down to simply shooting with intention. If you shoot digital with the same amount of attention to detail as you would naturally do when shooting film, then your skills as a photographer would grow just as fast. But there's something about shooting digital where it just is missing. You just don't have that, and maybe you could give yourself the constraint of going out and specifically only shooting 36 photos of an event or something like this, and then coming back and being hypercritical of your photos. That would be great. But with digital, you just inherently don't go out with the same amount of caution as you do when shooting film. Now, if you were just shooting photos for snapshots or casual photos of the kids, things that you just want to remember because that's what it is, then maybe film isn't for you. But if you want your photography to be your artistic expression, your creative outlet, more so than just grip and grin type photos, then I cannot stress the potential benefits that shooting film has for you. Now, if you're interested in shooting film, you want to dip your toes in it, but you're totally lost on where to start, especially just to look for a film camera or just what to look for, I would stick with whatever digital camera you have. So if you shoot Canon, the Canon AE1 is a great choice and will work with all of your Canon digital EF camera lenses. That's great. And if you shoot Nikon, the Nikon FE2 is also a great choice because, again, your Nikon full-frame lenses will work on the film camera. Now, both cameras right now, as of mid-October 2019, can be purchased for under $100. I told you, you can shoot full frame for under $100. Now, when buying used gear online, it can be kind of a wild west, so I always use KEH. Now, they test all of their gear and stand behind it if something goes wrong. You can go to KEH.com or use my affiliate link in the show notes of this episode, which really helps the show out at no additional cost to you. You can search for those cameras specifically, or there's a specific button for 35mm film cameras. You can find something that you like and then find a lens that goes with it. Try out something new. And if you're interested in shooting film but don't want to develop it yourself, right? There's that side as well. Then there are, plenty of places online. You can take it to Costco. You can probably take it to, another big box store. And what they're going to do is they're just going to ship it off, get it developed, and then send it back. But if you don't have either of those places close to you, there's a website called thedarkroom.com, and developing a roll will cost you about $12 per roll. So that is an option as well. So, as I said, shooting film is neither a waste of time nor money, nor is it the key to greatness. Shooting with intention is the key to greatness. Okay, so that is it for this week. Until next week, I want you to get out. I want you to keep shooting. I want you to stay safe. And I want you to focus on yourself. All right, I love you all.
If you enjoyed today's podcast, please leave us a review in iTunes or your favorite podcast player. And continue the conversation with Raymond and other listeners of the podcast by joining the Beginner Photography Podcast Facebook group today. Thank you. We'll see you again next week.